Imagine walking into a bare, rather gloomy refectory in Milan, the kind of long monastic dining hall where Dominican friars once sat in silence, eating their bean soup. At the far end, on a wall that has seen better days, there is a painting so famous that it has become a cliché. And yet, when you stand in front of it for the first time, it still knocks the wind out of you. This is Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, painted between 1495 and 1498, and quite possibly the most argued about, copied, restored, damaged and revered image in the whole of Western art. The scene is the moment Jesus has just said, "One of you will betray me." 13 men around a table, and every single one of them reacts differently. That, in a nutshell, is the genius of it. No one is sitting still like waxworks. They are alive with shock, anger, fear, denial. It's a frozen explosion of human emotion, and Leonardo, being Leonardo, does something no one had ever quite dared before. He makes the disciples look like real people you might meet in the street. Fishermen with rough hands, a tax collector with a shifty glance, a young John who looks as if he might faint. Even Jesus himself, calm in the center, has a kind of luminous sadness that feels almost modern. But let's start at the beginning, because nothing about this painting was straightforward, not even the commission. In the 1490s, Milan is ruled by Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro, the Moor. Because of his dark complexion, he's a clever, ruthless man who wants to turn Milan into the new Florence. He's already lured Leonardo away from Florence with promises of horses. Leonardo loved horses and big projects. One of those projects is the church and convent of Santa Maria del Grazie. Ludovico wants to make it his family mausoleum, and he decides the friar's dining room needs a suitably grand decoration. So he asks Leonardo to paint the Last Supper on the end wall. Now, most artists at the time would have used proper fresco technique. Paint fast onto wet plaster, colors sink in, and it lasts forever. But Leonardo hates being rushed. He wants to be able to work slowly, add layer upon layer, change his mind, get the expressions exactly right. So he invents his own method. He seals the wall, paints in oils and tempera on a dry surface, like a giant panel painting. Brilliant for subtlety, disastrous for survival. Within a few years, the paint is flaking off. By the time Vasari sees it in 1556, he says it's already little more than a blur of spots. Damp from the kitchen on the other side of the wall, refectory doors slamming, Napoleonic soldiers using the room as a stable. The poor thing is battered almost to death. Yet somehow it survives, and every generation falls in love with it again. Why? Because it's not just a religious picture, it's a psychological drama. Look at the way the disciples are arranged in 4 groups of 3, like waves rippling out from the calm center that is Christ. Leonardo uses perspective the way a conductor uses an orchestra. All the lines of the ceiling, beams, the tapestries, even the edges of the table, converge on Jesus' head, as if the whole architecture of the room is bowing to him. And yet he's not grand or imperial. He's accepting his fate. His hands are open, almost as if he's already on the cross. People have spent centuries trying to read secret messages into the painting. The most famous modern theory is that the figure on Jesus' right, the one traditionally called John, is actually Mary Magdalene. If you squint, the negative space between Jesus and this figure makes a sort of V shape, the feminine symbol, and an M for Magdalene, or matrimony, or whatever you fancy. Dan Brown made a fortune out of this idea in the Da Vinci Code. The truth is simpler and more moving. That soft-faced, slightly effeminate figure is just the young Apostle John, as Leonardo imagined him. Leonardo liked beauty, male and female, and he wasn't frightened of androgyny. There's no hidden code here, only the open code of human feeling. But there is one real mystery. Judas. Everyone wants to know how Leonardo painted the traitor. In earlier Last Suppers, Judas is always on the other side of the table, separated from the others like a pariah. Leonardo brings him back into the fold. He's the one clutching the bag of silver, knocking over the salt cellar with his elbow. Spilled salt, bad luck, betrayal, and his face is in shadow. But he's still part of the group. That's the point. Evil isn't obviously evil. It sits at the same table, eats the same bread. The Restoration is its own epic. By the 1970s, the painting is a ghost of itself, covered in glue, repainted by generations of well-meaning hacks. In 1978, a brilliant restorer called Pinin Brambilla Barcelon begins what will become a 22-year labor of love. She works with a microscope, removing centuries of grime and overpaint millimeter by millimeter. When she finishes in 1999, the world gasps. The colors are suddenly vivid, the blues, the oranges, the acid greens of the landscape seen through the windows. Christ's robe is a deep glowing red shot through with blue shadows. It's like seeing the painting for the first time, except, of course, that half of it is gone forever. Leonardo's original surface has flaked away in huge patches. What we see now is partly him, partly the restorer's educated guess. Some people hate it and say it looks too clean, too bright. Others weep because they feel they're closer to Leonardo than anyone has been for 500 years. Stand there today, behind the climate-controlled barrier, because now the painting is treated like a sick patient on life support, and you can still feel the force of it. 13 men, one a terrible announcement, and the whole history of the world turning on that instant. It's theatrical, it's intimate, it's heartbreaking, and it's fragile. One more flood, one more war, one careless generation, and it could vanish. That, I think, is why we keep coming back. The Last Supper is not just a masterpiece, it's a miracle of survival. A fragile skin of pigment on a crumbling wall, holding within it the full blast of human drama. Leonardo knew we are all temporary. He painted on a wall that was already beginning to reject his work and still managed to create something that feels eternal. Every time I see it, I think of those friars eating their bean soup in silence, looking up at the far end of the room and being reminded night after night that love and betrayal, loyalty and cowardice, life and death are all present at the same table. And that 5 centuries later is still true.